The village of Eldermoor had always whispered of justice, but in truth, it had long feared it. Justice here was not measured in fairness or reason. It wore the face of the magistrate, a man whose gnarled hands had never known mercy and whose eyes were as cold as the winter sky. In the year of our Lord 1382, the villagers learned exactly what it meant when that justice came riding into their lives. It began with Tomas, a farmhand of humble birth, accused of theft. Some said he had stolen grain from the communal store, meant for the poor and the infirm. Others whispered he had spoken ill of the priest, questioning the church's authority over the village. Tomas denied it, his voice trembling yet determined, but denial in Eldermoor held little weight. The magistrate pronounced sentence without trial. Tomas would face the law of the horse, a punishment reserved for those whose crimes demanded spectacle, whose sin could not go unseen, a punishment designed to carve fear into the hearts of the living. The villagers awoke that morning to a bitter wind that whipped across the frozen landscape, tearing through ragged cloaks and driving snow into the crooked eaves of cottages. Word of Tomas's fate had spread, and soon a crowd gathered in the village square, faces pale and fearful, eyes wide with anticipation and dread. Some hid their children behind skirts and curtains, others stood frozen, unable to tear their eyes from the impending horror. Even the bravest men felt the chill of foreboding press down upon them. For in Eldermoor, cruelty was law, and the magistrate its unflinching hand. Tomas was dragged from his home, his hands bound tightly behind his back, rope cutting into flesh already chapped by winter. His father followed silently, a figure bent with sorrow, lips moving in a prayer that would go unheard. His mother covered her face with trembling hands, sobbing quietly, as though to spare herself the sight of what was to come. The magistrate's assistants placed Tomas against a massive draft horse, its flanks shivering, hooves stamping into the frozen earth. They tied the rope around his torso, securing him to the animal with a precision born of repeated cruelty. At first, the horse stood still, sensing the tension in the crowd. Tomas's breaths came in ragged gasps. The cold bit into his skin, and panic widened in his eyes. The magistrate raised a hand, signaling the start. The horse moved forward slowly, then faster, dragging Tomas across the snow-streaked earth. Limbs twisted unnaturally, shoulders dislocated, bones creaking under the strain of rope and flesh. His cries split the cold morning air, raw and human, rising above the murmurs and fearful whispers of the villagers. Some of the spectators wept openly, unable to reconcile the innocence of the boy with the horror unfolding before them. Others, bound by fear and superstition, watched silently, certain that to look away would invite suspicion, that to flee would bring the magistrate's wrath upon them. The horse's path took Tomas past familiar sights, the blackened barn where he had fed the animals, the frozen creek where he had once fished with his brother, the churchyard where stones marked lives long ended. Each step crushed him further, tearing at flesh, bruising bone, grinding hope into the mud beneath him. The magistrate's face remained unmoved, watching the punishment as though it were a sermon, a lesson carved into flesh for all to see. The crowd's emotions swung between horror and grim fascination, an unspoken acknowledgement of the power wielded by one man over so many lives. Time lost meaning as Tomas was dragged, his screams gradually turning into ragged, guttural gasps. His body was a tapestry of broken limbs and torn sinew, a grotesque monument to law and authority. Yet in the midst of agony, there was a defiance in his eyes, fleeting though it was, a stubborn spark that even the magistrate could not extinguish. Some villagers claimed they saw it and swore that Tomas, even in his final moments, glared at the magistrate with a wordless accusation that pierced deeper than any rope or horse could. The horse finally slowed, dragging Tomas's mangled body to a frozen clearing beyond the village, leaving a path of mud, blood, and broken flesh in its wake. The magistrate stepped forward, examining the devastation, pronouncing justice served. His assistants untied the rope, letting the body slump to the earth, a final, grotesque tableau meant to warn and terrify. Children buried their faces in their parents' skirts. Mothers clutched each other. Fathers turned away, silent and shivering. Even after the crowd dispersed, a lingering unease filled Eldermoor. The fields where Tomas had been dragged seemed cursed. The snow had melted into a mixture of mud and blood that would not dry, leaving a stain on the land itself. Animals refused to graze nearby, and even the wind seemed to carry a hollow note, echoing the screams and the despair that had filled the morning. Some villagers whispered that Tomas's spirit lingered, restless, a warning of cruelty unchecked, a reminder that justice without mercy is no justice at all. Families remained silent in their homes for days, fearing the magistrate's notice or reprisal. Life continued, but with a pall over it that could not be lifted. Villagers spoke less and walked cautiously, eyes darting at shadows, hearts heavy with unspoken grief. Parents taught their children to obey, to submit, to fear, but fear itself became a living thing, curling in the corners of cottages and following them into the fields. Even years later, long after the magistrate had died and Tomas was forgotten by law, Eldermoor remembered. The story of the boy dragged by the horse became a caution whispered at firesides, a warning of what happens when authority is absolute, when cruelty masquerades as justice, when innocence is powerless before the whims of men. Travelers who passed through the village remarked on the cold that never seemed to lift from the fields, on the uneasy feeling in the air, and on the stories the villagers told in hushed tones, of the boy who had once screamed across the frozen earth, and whose cries still seemed to linger in the wind. Eldermoor endured, but it was forever haunted, not by spirits, but by memory, by the knowledge that terror had walked its streets openly, and that the line between law and horror could be vanishingly thin. And sometimes, when the wind howls through the trees and the snow drifts in strange patterns across the frozen fields, the villagers swear they hear it. A faint scraping, a whisper of leather and rope, and the echo of a boy's final, defiant scream carried across the earth, warning all who would listen of the cost of cruelty and the price of unquestioned authority.